Hey, good morning, everybody, and welcome to BCB Live, the safest station in the nation. And let me tell you something, it started out at 43 degrees this morning when I got up, and it's already 23 in just a few hours, dropped 20 degrees, and by tonight it's going to drop another 15.
Yeah, and good afternoon for you that live in the other time zone, because it's afternoon, okay? Good morning, everybody.
Whatever.
Listen to you.
And let me just, all right, good noon, everyone. How's that? Good day.
Yeah.
Hey, so I am wearing a sweatshirt today. I'm wearing a safety sweatshirt because I got trains may exceed 80 mile an hour.
And it's bright yellow. Does not need any reflective gear like this, because that is bright.
I just want to be seen, right? I want everybody to turn around and look at me and my sign. Let me just tell you, train going 80 miles an hour, and it's a mile away, and you got looks way, way down the distance. How long will it take before it gets to you?
About 35 seconds?
About 50 seconds, and it'll be on top of you.
Yeah.
Be zooming past. I'm just saying, you got to be careful when you look down the track. Understand that when you see signs like this, if you see a train on the track somewhere, it's probably going to be there really quickly.
Yeah, stop for it, because you won't win.
You won't win. Anyway, yeah, pay attention. All right, so, you know, the weather's been kind of crazy, right? We got a lot of weather going on.
You think? You just said here, and yes, it has, Dave. It's been very crazy. Sorry about that.
So let me show you a picture. There were some truck drivers stuck for 7 days in the snow. Look, here's one in his truck. By the way, that's the top of the tractor. I just don't even know if anybody understands that. That's called a mid-roof. Yeah. Look at this one. Yeah, that's stuck.
Yeah, they're not going anywhere soon. They can get their shovel out, but they're not going anywhere soon.
Yeah, that's shovel. Okay. You want to make sure that's cleared away so you can, if you want to run it, you got to make sure it's not buried or you won't.
Yeah, not much oxygen getting to the engine at that point if it's sealed up.
No.
So.
70 truckers.
Yeah, 70 trucks buried in the snow they had to dig out. So, yeah, for a week. This looks like a week project. And it's cold. And if you've ever been out in the cold with a shovel, yeah. It's exhausting.
It never ends well.
Day 6.
He's here. Some of the trucks are starting to move around, get themselves dug out. The interstate ain't open yet. It's going to be a while for me.
Yeah, it's going to be a while. This is one of those times when...
Yeah, I don't know when I'm going to get out.
I don't know either.
I'm doing a video for my wife and kids. Yeah.
Luckily, there's nobody beside you, so.
Right.
Well,
So this is me. Day 6.
well, he's almost clear, isn't he?
Yeah, the good news is the snow's great insulation, so I mean, I'm sure he's
Anybody
pretty warm.
bring a shovel, you're up this way. I'm going to be digging a while. That's down. All the snow is blowed all in around my tires and everything on the tractor. I got to dig down and get some fuel in it. The fuel additive. It's cold. Anyway, stay safe, stay warm. Somebody come help me dig, will ya?
Alright, sorry about that. I didn't realize it was a video. I thought it was a picture when I started.
No, I'm glad you showed it because it gives a real good picture, a real good idea of just exactly what sometimes it means to be a truck driver.
Yeah.
I mean, really, most people don't get it. Most people don't know.
Were they trapped in that for 6 days?
Yes, it took them.
Well, I knew the trucks were. I didn't realize the drivers were.
Okay. Where do you think he was?
Well, when the
At the truck stop. Where do you think he was?
I didn't live the life. I'm sorry.
Yeah, he's at a truck stop.
In his truck. for 6 days, not going anywhere.
Interstate's closed. You're sitting there, and you're like, okay. You go to bed. You wake up.
That's right.
Nothing's changed.
He did mention the interstate was closed. That's right.
Yeah, you're not going anywhere. Yeah, no, I get it. I think it's a great image of what sometimes truck drivers go through, the problems that they have, and yeah, he's right. He's gonna.
You know, and when we talk about shutting drivers down early before we get into that type of situation, it goes to show what happens when you get into that type of situation. Some days you're there a lot longer than you first thought. 6 days, in fact.
Yeah, you know, it is a tough deal. And we're facing some more difficult times coming up this time. I will tell you, for most of us, there is going to be some blizzard-like conditions across some of the parts of the country, but I think most everyone is going to be directly affected by the cold and severe temperatures.
Yeah.
The high winds and severe temperatures. Be aware.
Yeah.
Understand the limitations of your equipment and machines out there in the cold weather.
And yourself. Understand your limitations, because that
and
cold
and be
that
honest
wind,
with you, right? And be honest with yourself, and be honest with the truck, and honest with it out there on the road. I mean, there's going to be some flash freezing across the country. Very light precipitation, but any that comes down is going to get froze quick, because this is a cold front coming in behind the wind.
Yeah, very cold front. I mean, Arctic cold
Somebody
front.
said, somebody said negative 57 in Wyoming today.
Whew. Could be.
All right. Other than that, I did see some stuff going. Well, you got somebody calling you. Wants to be on the show. Is that what's happening?
Wants to be updated on what the weather is doing outside. Hey, you know, it's probably a little windy and a little cold out.
Yeah, look outside. I did tell you that there was a article in there that I read the other day about initiatives also drawing upon from veterans coming into the trucking industry and being truck drivers. I think that's a great idea. I think the premise of the article, transitioning veterans into trucking, I think what the greatest part about this is those who serve find another way to continue that process by serving out there on the road. It is a great idea, fantastic promise of another future of those that have gone in and been in the military a long time, have an opportunity to go in, get in, and be truck drivers, be a great workforce out there for the United States. I'll tell you, there's probably no one more that I would want out there on the road than those that I have trusted with the security of this country for so long. So I'm good with those people, with some of the greatest intangibles that any individual can carry with them coming from the military, including leadership, responsibility, discipline, courage. You want me to go on? Loyalty. You know, it is.
I'll take that type of person
every day.
Every day.
Yeah, so I think this is a great initiative. I think it's a great article, and it is worth to read. The other thing that I wanted to mention, there was a new came out about truck emissions by the EPA rule, cracks down on truck emission limits going forward. Some of it was incredibly, it's going to have to change the industry. I looked at some of the numbers. I don't have them all in front of me in detail, but I'll tell you, we're talking about 85% less emissions than currently. And I don't even, you talk about, I don't even, and they're talking about engines.
Internal combustion. It's like, there's a byproduct.
Yeah, burning oil. I'll tell you, it's pretty incredible. It's a great, you should read it. You should look at it. I tell you what, there is going to be some pushback from the makers, from industries. There's going to have to be more technology.
So what's the timeline on it?
It's all varied, by the way, it's quick.
Yeah, that's the scary part.
That is the scary part. And you know the difficulties that we had with equipment when we first started.
Ooh, do I ever.
With these EGR systems and these.
Yeah, I was managing a small shop with about 50 trucks. I know it well when they started coming in, and
the difficulties. I mean, the technology it's got to be worked out, and it's costly, and it is difficult for the industry. And you know, I understand we're moving towards what we're moving, trying to move towards what we're trying to do, but at the same time, wow. If you want one to be at 2045 and you want the other one to be turned over in 2, 3, 4 years, wow, that's That's pretty crazy. All right.
It'll be a challenge for them.
It will be a challenge. I think everybody should look at that and some of the EPA. I'll have more of that information at some point so that we can look at those and go over those. I'll make sure that I gather the details. I'll put them on a chart.
Yeah.
And so that we can understand where we are, where we were, where we come to, where we've gotten to, and then where they want to be. And I think we need to look at those.
And the added cost that'll give to our industry.
I don't even know that,
research and development is not cheap.
Yeah, I don't even know if we know what that number is yet. So there is estimates on it, but it's pretty incredible. All right, when we come back in just a second, I want to make sure everybody knows we got Zach from New York. We're going to talk a little bit here in just a second with trucktrailer.com. That's who he's with. We're going to be talking to him a little bit about what's going on in some of the initiatives up there in New York when we come back here on BCB Live, the safest station in the nation.
You're watching BCB Live, the safest station in the nation. BCB Live covers freight. Here we are now at 21% of record freight being rejected. News down in Texas. We're going to talk a little bit about this. We had another $1.5 million seizure. If ever there's a time to do a pre or post trip, it's if you're doing something wrong. Weather, traffic.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome to some traffic and weather with Buckle Up Bob. You can kind of see where the visibility can be compromised a little bit. Again, right where that rain is.
And most importantly, safety. One of the things that we must do is make sure that safety is the number one thing that we focus on.
Going into an intersection yellow is not the way. That's to clear an intersection, not to enter an intersection.
Tune in weekdays from 7 a.m. to 8 a.m. Central Standard Time. You can watch BCB Live through LinkedIn, YouTube, or Facebook. So what are you waiting for? Subscribe today and follow BCB Live.
I'm having some audio issue. No, hold on.
5, 6, 7.
Oh, there we go. Yeah.
You got me?
I got you.
All right, we are back. Hey, it's Drive Safe Dave here at BCB Live, the safest station in the nation. Zach Miller, head of media and development at trucktrailer.com. All right, Zach, what's going on in New York City right now?
Well, there's always a lot going on in New York City. It's one of the joys and aggravations of being in New York City, I suppose. But what we're looking at in 2023, and you mentioned it a little bit with the new emission standards coming down from the feds, is there's a lot of focus to how do we make freight movement more efficient and more sustainable. And New York City is pretty unique among even dense urban areas across the country. New York City is so heavily reliant on trucks to deliver freight. Trucks deliver almost just a shade under 90% of all freight in New York City. The national average, as we know, is closer to 70-75% of freight. So it's heavily reliant on trucks. It is a dense area. There are a lot of different road users, many of whom happen to be vulnerable road users, cyclists, electronic cyclists, pedestrians alike. So the question becomes, how do we accommodate this freight? How do we plan for projected increases in freight volumes while maybe trying to have smaller, more efficient vehicles? So one of the things we're looking to do with the Trucking Association of New York, with City DOT, and a couple of other stakeholders, is it possible to build out these sort of micro hub distribution plans? And in a micro hub distribution plan, what we're trying to think is a truck can come, sort of unload either at the curb or maybe there'll be a building provided to them. And then that trucking company will contract with maybe an e-cargo bike company or some other smaller mode of transportation to finish out that delivery, that sort of last mile or last half a mile, so to speak. Is that feasible in communities? That's one of the things we're trying to figure out in 2023. We're also trying to figure out just exactly how electrification would work. How would fleets that operate pretty substantial tractor trailers, how would they incorporate electric vehicles into their operations? And that's holistically, right? It's not just the truck itself, but it's the maintenance of the truck, being able to recharge that truck. Would there be any sort of special delivery needs from the receiver point of view? So those are two pilots that we're building out in 2023 to really learn how these transitions could potentially work.
You know, Zach, and as we talk about this, and I'm sitting here listening to it, it's a whole lot more complicated in the sense of trying to get these micro distributors to go together. To me, it's like, okay, let's have 25 different plumbing companies. You can't run 25 different sets of pipes 20, different companies running all different kind of plumbing. They kind of have to work together to try to figure out who's going to pay and how we're going to, the income's going to be derived. Because if I'm bringing my dog food, let's just, right, you also want the guy to bring the charcoal briquettes, and you also want the guy to bring, the linens, right, and then the other guy bring the oranges. But, but you're going to want it all put in a simple truck. It makes it a little bit harder than people think of when they think of a redistribution center, correct?
That's exactly it. That's exactly right. And I think that's why it's so important that the Trucking Association of New York is so heavily involved in this, because it is a little bit like matchmaking, right? It's a little bit like, you want to even call it online dating. It's not just something where a company is going to feel comfortable taking everything off the back of their truck, putting it on the street and saying, well, some app, like I could go on an app and some cyclist or something could come and take it. Absurd. We know that's not how deliveries happen. We know how intricate the delivery system is, and each vendor, as you said, has their own sort of set of needs, which is to say nothing about the liability of the company if something happens to the shipping, or who's responsible from that trade-off. Is it secure? What about weather conditions? I mean, we know we saw the blizzards and the winter conditions. Well, New York City has a pretty rough winter climate. So how will all that be protected? These are, of course, solvable issues, but they have to be factored in the planning phase for this to yield any sort of success. So that's why, at least I'm glad New York City, there are many advocates that want this to be like, do it now, do it more, but I have to give the city a lot of credit. It looks like they're doing it the right way, small scale, pilot program, get the legacy fleets involved early, get legitimate cargo bike companies involved, not just some person who maybe owns a bike and has an app or something. We're not doing that. Not at the start, at least. We need to make sure that this entire system can run the way freight is delivered currently, safely, efficiently, properly. So I think that, and I hope this quote doesn't come back to bite me, but I do think the city is doing this right at the start, and that's why we're excited about building out one or two of these pilots.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Is also the city and the state also working to create tax incentives also to help fund these ideas? Because I tell you what, if this works here, this would work just about anywhere else. It's a little bit flatter and a little bit, a little bit wider.
Exactly. And that's why we actually partnered with an urban planning consulting group, EA Creative Consulting, who said that exact same thing, which is we have to start it in New York, get it right in New York, but if we do that, it can be transferred all across the nation, especially in these urban cores. the incentive part is such a great question, because a lot of times there's this misconception of the industry, that the industry has so much money that fleets have, anything is just the cost of doing business, and fleets can eat it, and none of this should be a problem. And we all know that's nonsense. The industry operates on razor thin margins.
Pennies.
Pennies, really, pennies on the dollar. There are a couple of outliers, of course, like anything in America, but really it is a razor thin industry. So in terms of the incentives, that's something that we have to go back to the city and say, let's build it out in that way. And I think what might make sense, and again, these are early conversations, but I think what might make sense is, instead of sort of having these itemized lists where they have parking tickets or metered parking or like a city-specific tax, things like that, maybe there could just be a fee, just like a monthly fee. And that monthly fee will cover the parking, any sort of real estate type of rent or distribution, the labor cost for the cycle company, where it could be more like a trusted vendor type of program instead of the fleets having to contract out themselves. They basically say, all right, New York City, here's your whatever it is quarterly check. Make sure this is all taken care of the way I need it to be taken care of. I do think, though, there might be some incentives when it comes to workforce development aspect to it, where if the city can say, we can get people who don't have a college degree, maybe they fell through the cracks after high school, maybe they didn't even graduate high school, but we can get them trained in this beginning phase of a career in logistics and transportation, and that's covered by state grants, that's covered by city grants. So maybe that's a part of it where they'll say, all right, you guys pay for the parking, we'll pay for the workforce development, we'll have this third party sort of verify that this is a legitimate logistics company and a legitimate cargo bike operator, like they're insured and licensed and all that. Maybe that's the way we go forward. But certainly, as we know, if the name of the game is, well, the trucking company is going to pay for everything here, it's not going to work. That's not feasible.
Yeah, this is going to have to be a team effort to make any of this work, because as you and I both know, there's going to be an incredible number of pushback groups that don't want any trucks in their area for any reason whatsoever, even though they depend on them all the time until they don't have their groceries, the trucks are in the way, they are too loud, they're too polluting, and they're too dangerous. But until they don't get the supplies they need, then they think you can have one without the other.
Exactly, and it's so interesting you say that, because earlier this week I put out a statement. I believe it was related to some talk about redoing the BQE, the Brooklyn Queens Expressway, which is a major highway and freight corridor here. And my statement was basically like how quickly we forget that it was just a couple of short years ago, during the worst of the pandemic, that it was the truck drivers that really kept the city afloat, kept our hospitals and pharmacies supplied, kept businesses, provided that lifeline to businesses, and made sure that the end user was able to shelter in place and had everything they needed. So, from 2020, truck drivers were hailed as COVID heroes right there on the front lines with doctors and nurses and cops and firefighters and all that, to now, again, continue to be vilified. We don't want them in our communities. Some nonsense about the pollutants, stuff like that. So it's just part and parcel for what we have to deal with sometimes among various groups. But it is important to keep an eye on the future and to say, all right, we should be treated with respect and dignity that we deserve, but that's not to say maybe we shouldn't look at some different ways of doing things either. Two things could be true at once.
Yeah, and I think it's necessary that we as a group and individuals understand that if we want cleaner, more efficient vehicles out there and we want them in our cities, we're going to have to help fund them to get there.
Yes.
And we're just going to have to, and we're going to have to figure out a way to incorporate them in our daily lives on that last mile of delivery. And it's going to have to be necessary for you, me, everyone involved to pitch in and find a way to get it done, because otherwise we're going to have to use the same systems that we have in place, and that's not what we're talking about here, right, Jack? We're talking about creating new processes, new systems in order to create a better environment for all of us and a more efficient environment.
That's exactly it. That's exactly right. And I think part of that is, yes, the industry has to start thinking of ways to change, and like you say, ways of maybe allocating resources to fund some of this. And I think from the municipal side of it, cities should really go back to using that regulatory hammer, if you will. Maybe hammer's not the right word, but using the regulatory toolbox to say, okay, let's go back to make sure when we have a regulation in place, it is legitimately for the safety and well-being of the community. And it's not just a regulation, it's not taxation via regulation. Because the industry cannot afford taxation via regulation and to make these investments in the new technologies and new vehicles. So what I'd say is, let's make sure that every regulation has a real true safety component to it, a real true environmental component to it, and then we could start letting some other ones go, which should of course free up funds for fleets to then invest in this new technology, in these newer vehicles. I think it's a fair compromise between industry and municipality without the government necessarily having to write large checks to the businesses to buy some of this equipment.
Yeah, I'm going to be, if we talk about this and as we continue to bring this forward, if you want New York City to grow both internally and externally, if you want it to understand that it has room for growth and room for betterment, these kinds of systems are necessary to be placed to make that possible for the future. Because if you're going to continue to rely on the old systems, it's not going to benefit anybody at all, because they just won't be financially feasible in the long term. And we'll still be doing, it'll still take truckloads of diapers to come in to feed instead of spreading the wealth, right? I mean, we're still going to have these issues. I'm just curious. And as you are big and you do a great job of working with City Hall and with local governments within the organization there, the trade association, truck association. How much is part of what you do educating the populace at large on just trucking? Because believe it or not, I think overall there is a